Hi everyone, this is Tonya Gibbs and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to create a watercolor card tutorial. Here's a glimpse of the card that we are going to create today. This is going to be super simple watercoloring techniques as well as some foiling techniques. The two stamps that I will feature today from Yvonne Blair Designs are Card Sentiments and Make Today. Both of these stamps will be linked up down below in a blog post where you can find them at either Impression Obsession or ask your local stamp retailers. So to get started today, we are going to use some of these supplies initially. These are some great watercolor brushes that I found that are very inexpensive. It's a nice starter set. This is the number 5 round paintbrush set in the set. The watercolor brushes are made by Royal Langnickel, and I found them at a department store in the set. They were very inexpensive. And then this is a very inexpensive watercolor set. I think I only paid like $5 or $6 for it. And for the mask that I'm sharing here, this is cut to 4 inches by 5¼ inches, and then I have die cut out a 3-inch circle die. Now I'm going to use the first piece of paper as a mask, and then the other piece of paper will be where I do my watercoloring. Now since I'm using a very light amount of water for this technique, I'm going to use cardstock because I don't want the texture of the watercolor paper to be on my design. So I'm going to suggest very light-handed with the water on this so that it doesn't buckle, but I am using 110-pound bond cardstock. And the blog post will have the measurements for all of the paper in the blog post. So to begin with, I'm going to use the color for the green leaves. I'm going to use heavy-handedly here with the teal color and then adding some of the green back in. And as you can tell, I'm starting with the point of the brush and then just dragging it towards the circle. I have placed my circle portion of my mask into the center and used a little ATG tape to stick it down. And then just dragging out where I think my leaves are going to be, and I'm wanting to keep my foliage at the top and the bottom more like a swag, and I'm going to keep the center part of my circle without any foliage at all. Of course, if your design wants to be completely in a circle, by all means do that. You certainly could. These techniques are super simple. I'm just taking the point of the brush and then dragging it towards the center of the mask. And the mask is going to keep my color from going into that circled area. I want it to keep as clean as possible. Now for the flower, I wanted it to be purple, so I'm going into the deepest purple that I have, and I'm just doing in a C shape. I'm pulling that color around. And then I'm not reloading pigment on my brush. I'm allowing that pigment to dilute out as I go to another shape, and just dragging it in a C and then filling it in until it's circular. That's all I'm doing. And then as I lift that up, I'm not going to go too deep into the circled area. I want to stay out of that deep area because I need an area where I can stamp my stamp. But I'm going to finish out the foliage so that it looks like it's overlapping into the circle. And these are sort of taking on a pace, my pansy shape. As you can tell, these are very simple, very, very simple. And it doesn't really matter what the flowers look like. Just put some dots of color down, and trust me when I tell you it's all over, it will look like a flower when you're done. Now I'm going into the navy blue, and I'm just going to add a few little dots. That's it, simple dots. Just add the little dots. And then for some bigger flowers, just add 4 dots in a cluster. Try and stay away from your purple flowers because they're very wet at this point and the color will wick into them, and you don't want to do that until they're completely dry. You of course can use your heat gun to go ahead and speed up the drying process if you'd like, but I'm living on the edge here and just going with it. Now notice that I'm not reloading my brush because that's going to give me a lighter colors of blue, and that's going to give my flowers a little interest and some shadowing and some highlights. I'm just going with it. And then when I put the color over onto the plastic top of my uh, paint palette, what that does is I've diluted it down with a little bit of water, which gives me just a little lighter shade of the pigment. And then whenever I pick it up straight from the pigment palette, I'm getting the darker shade of that palette. So now I'm going back into my pansies or irises, however you want to look at them. And I'm adding some blue, and that's going to give me some shadows. So look at your darker areas will be where petals overlap or where they come from the center out and the sun is not necessarily hitting them, and just draw some quick little line strokes. Those will act as shadows on those petals and give them a more realistic look. Then you just continue out building out some little dots here and there. Those can be either little buds or, some other little like status type flowers. And these are really simple to do, and it's great practice. You could practice in an art journal or practice even on these little card panels like this. I like to practice when I'm sitting in front of the TV or even trying to practice in the car. I take a small watercolor set with me. So now what I've done is I've gone in with some yellow, and I'm adding a few little spots of yellow here and there. The yellow is just going to add some interest to all of these blues. It's a nice contrasting color, and all flowers have a little touch of yellow. So to keep it from getting muddy, since it is a contrasting color, I'm just going to go ahead and heat set that. Now it will reactivate because these are watercolors. So a neat little trick to try is before we add our little stamens there in the center, is to come back with a paint marker, which this is white, a paint marker, and just add a few dots there in the center where I'm going to add yellow later, and that will cover up some of the purples that are there and allow my yellow to really pop. So once that was dry, I just went back in with my yellow and placed it right on top of the white paint pen. So the white paint pen is opaque paint, so acrylic based, so it will cover up that blue tone really nicely and allow my yellow to really pop in there. You can tell my flowers are really starting to come to life and they have a lot of color to them. So now I need to make sure I'm keeping to my true circle form. And I was. So now I'm going to add some color to my background. And since these are all blue, I decided to go with the Distress ink in Tumbled Glass. And it won't matter if I color right over because it will just complement those blues really well, even the greens. So I'm just going to notice that I'm adding the pigment, but then I'm brushing it off onto my palette there and then very lightly coming over the top. I don't want this to be super dark because I don't want it to look like a rainy sky, but I do like that this color has a really nice it's just a really nice blue. So when I lift up my circle, you can see that there in the center it has stayed completely white. Now this isn't going to matter because I'm going to later come back and cut it out, but what it is going to do is give me a really nice crisp edge to know where to cut. So doing that, I covered up some of my white spots, and I think the white really adds a lot of interest to this, so I'm going to come back and add that white right back into it with that paint marker. These little white dots really add something to this piece. So, I could doodle and add these little highlights all day long. This is part of the process for me. Now, you could skip this step for sure, but I thought that adding some doodled lines over my flowers would kind of help to make them a little more whimsical, and it certainly is a technique you could use if you're not great at painting or you don't feel like you're a great watercolor artist, because this now makes it whimsical and line drawn and fun, and there are no mistakes in that. So it does kind of give shape to something that felt like it had no shape before. So what I would suggest doing is just follow where the natural line drawing is with the watercolor. So now I've just gone in and fussy cut out that little circle there, and where those white lines are, I'm just taking the ink that was on my little applicator tool and covering those up and adding a little darker edge around my border. For video purposes, I did speed the drawing time up a little bit. So It did take me probably about 15 to 20 minutes to draw this card. Now, this step I believe I have done out of order, and I didn't realize I was doing it because I was just going with the flow. So I feel like the shaker part you probably shouldn't put together until after you've done your stamping. Because it made it very difficult to line my stamping up. So this, I feel like I jumped ahead just a bit. But I've added a piece of acetate to the back of this, and now I'm going to add 2 rows of this dimensional tape. But I highly suggest you do your stamping first and then assemble this tape and acetate to this piece. You'll see why in just a few minutes when I'm challenged with where to put my stamping. But the acetate measurements are a 1/4 inch smaller than the piece that you see there that I drew. So again, all those measurements will be on the blog post, which is linked up in the description box down below. So make sure you're going and checking out that blog post, and leave me some love over there on that blog post too, so that Yvonne knows that you've come by and visited. So this is the Scotch adhesive. This is my favorite foam tape. I absolutely love it, and I buy it in giant rolls because it sticks for life, but it also it's easy to get off your scissors. I just absolutely love it. But it's not super thick, so you can add multi-dimensions. So now I've used my powder tool to add a little powder, and here you can see what I mean. It's very difficult for me to find placement because I've already added the foam tape, I've already added the acetate. So now here I am trying to ink up my image, my stamp, and I can't get it through that hole. So what I would suggest is not doing all of those steps with the acetate and all of that until after you've done this part of the image. So yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. I was just jumping ahead. But anyway, so I've taken the stamp, and it says, it's super awesome. It says, "Make today so awesome, yesterday gets jealous." So it's a great sentiment, and I'm using Versa ink to stamp that. And then this is the sticky powder, embossing powder from Ranger, and it's meant, I think, for sticking glitter and things down. So I decided, I wonder if it will work with foil, and guess what? It kind of does. I think it would work better if it was an image stamp rather than text, but I like the texture that it gave to my text. So what you do is you heat emboss it and get it really good and hot, and then place your foil right on top, but you got to do it super fast because once it dries, to me it didn't work as well once it was dry. I put my Mink setting on 4 and then made a sleeve out of paper so that it was a little thinner to heat up that sticky stuff again, and then let it cool really well, and then you want to burnish it. Now I must admit, you may want to play around with the settings on your Mink depending on which envelope you use to guide your thing through, because I noticed that the thicker the material was that went through there, I had to use a little different setting on my Mink. So and if you're using a regular laminator, you may want to play with that as well, because that sticky embossing powder has to heat up again in order for that foil to adhere to it. Also keep in mind, the reason this particular stamp worked was because the lettering was big. If you were trying to use a smaller lettering, it may not work. And you don't want letters that have too much detail, because it is kind of jagged in here, and it's not a perfect smooth foiling, which is okay with me because to me it has texture and I really like that. So I was perfectly fine with that technique. But I believe that if you were trying this technique on a something that had a really thick stamped image, like maybe Yvonne's butterflies or her heart that had a thicker line, it would be a much better application and smoother. So the thicker the lines are, the better this works. So you really just need to experiment with it. But I had a lot of fun with this, and I've made several cards with this, and I really love the technique, and I want to try it out for some Christmas tags. So now what I've done is I've added a few of sequins to my shaker card area, and then I also adhered a few down so that whenever the card is not being shook, there's still some that are visible in the pane so that it's obvious that there's something in there to shake. And then I've just added some clear sequins and then some white iridescent ones. And then I've also added them to my florals drawing there on the cover. So now it's time to do the inside of my card, because you can't add all of this color and then on the inside of your card not do some sort of beautiful floral spray as well, right? So what I've done is I'm going to just do a simple little design here in the center, just one little pansy maybe, and then maybe come back and do another little floral spray coming up the top and then the bottom. And again, these are just simple little lines and then just little dots, just putting in little dithering dots. That's it. Just itty bitty little dots. I'm just varying it between purple and blue, just going back and forth and just literally just doing little dots. Anyone can do this. I promise you, no matter your skill level, it is possible to do this. I challenge you to practice. I want to see my Instagram feed littered up with practiced dots. I just want to see you guys try this. Just please try it and share it with me. Hashtag following Tonya Gibbs so that I can see it. I want to see you practicing watercolor cards, because that tells me that you're trying, and I love that. Send them to me on Facebook. I want to see them on my wall. Clutter up my wall with where you're practicing how to do this. I really love to see it. I know you can do it. So then I've just gone back with my paint pen and added a couple of dots. Now I'm doing my doodling. Same thing I did over on the cover. Exact same thing. The only thing I'm going to do a little bit different, and it's only because it was laying on my desk versus pulling out the paint again, because this was already dry basically, is I grabbed out my yellow, I think this is cadmium yellow, Stampers' Big Brush Artist pen to do the yellows. That's all. And it was just because it was there and the card was already dry. So then now I'm grabbing out a doodle pen. This is my all-time favorite go-to. It's the Uniball 207, and you can find these at all office supply stores. I love them because they do not smear. They are waterproof. Absolutely love them. They're a little bit wider barrel on them, so they're more like a medium point. Perfect for mixed media. They draw over anything. Just did a few little shaky lines there. I absolutely love this effect on the inside of cards. So then I reach over and grab my Heidi Swap navy blue ink, and I stamp in "Tomorrow is another day" right there up to the top, and it sort of fits with the sentiment because it says make today so awesome, yesterday gets jealous, and then tomorrow is another day. So you just can continue making awesome days every day. So I absolutely love these stamp sets, and then "Tomorrow is another day" is from the card sentiment set. So here's another glimpse of the card. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today and sharing this process video with me. This is what my card looks like. It's absolutely gorgeous. I don't even know if I want to share this with anybody or if I just want to hang it up in my studio, because it's just an awesome reminder of how awesome every day should be. So there's the inside of the card, and here is the final card. And again, thank you so much for hanging out with me, and if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. Go check out the blog post that's listed down in the description box down below, and leave me some love over there as well. Thank you guys so much.